on this episode of The Clarity Code.
And that was still a lot to explain until they created an explainer video. And yeah, it seemed like a simple thing, but they're like, this is what it means to, in their case, orchestrate an experience for a consumer. We were able to directly attribute that to greater pipeline activity because of that video. And in that case, it was really easy because people were reaching out that had been cold in the pipeline, inactive. They're like, hey, I saw the video. Now I want to talk to you guys again.
Now it makes sense. Yeah, because of the explainer.
Right.
The Clarity Code, presented by Commotion Engine. Clear insights from marketing leaders.
In this episode of The Clarity Code, I sit down with Jared Johnson, who has spent over 2 decades helping healthcare organizations build smarter digital experiences. As the former CMO at Praia Health and the senior strategist for leading brands like St. Jude's, W.L. Gore, and Phoenix Children's Hospital, he's seen how consumer expectations are reshaping the healthcare creative space. With experience across providers, vendors, devices, and consulting, Jared brings a really unique 360-degree perspective on digital transformation and consumer engagement. He also hosts the award-winning Healthcare Rap podcast, has authored 2 books, and even raps live on stage during conferences. In this episode, Jared unpacks what marketers can learn from healthcare's transformation, how to create experiences that consumers actually value, and why breaking out of content autopilot is the key for critical growth. In this episode, Jared unpacks what marketers can learn from healthcare's transformation, how to create genuine experiences, and really break out of the content autopilot, which is critical for growth. So Jared, welcome to the Clarity Code.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot of marketers in healthcare, but there's only one that I know of that raps on stage.
Maybe it's better that way. That way.
Yeah, where did that start? How did you, have you always been a rapper, or and marketing is just your side gig?
No, it's kind of the joke, right? Like, look at me, like I'm, have not always been the rapper. There was the origin story is I was asked to give a keynote speech it would have been 2017 at a theater at Johns Hopkins University. Never done that before. Never really been on stage. And just wanted to do something a little different to introduce myself. So I just rewrote the words to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air intro and decided to come out on stage while, rapping to that. It was like a minute long, and they got a good reaction. It at least got people interested in something. And that stuck with me for a little bit. And then a few months later, when I started a podcast again, because I had one before that and took a break, a few months later, I'm like, I want to start podcasting again, and let's lean into that persona. Came up with the intro to Healthcare Rap, which is actually all about, in this case, how to bring together a lot of different sides of the business in healthcare that don't usually come together, make healthcare easier for regular, everyday people. And so, yeah, it was a rap, and that's coming to play every now and then. But yeah, that's half the gig. It's like, what do you expect when you see this
Yeah.
come out on
Let's go the
stage?
exact opposite when we see you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably really unique for a healthcare conference to have anyone rap at all. So it's pretty impressive.
Indeed.
So yeah, you've been recognized as one of the top 100 digital health influencers. You obviously rap, so that's a little bit different. But what else do you do that really adds to that thought leadership platform, and how can other CMOs replicate the success that you've seen in their industries?
It probably starts with the thought of recognizing that as a platform, that it's not just one channel. Like, do you have a point of view that's worth sharing with the world? I like to think just about everyone I've interviewed hundreds of people on the podcast too over the years. I have yet to find somebody who didn't have a story that you could pull out of them that was interesting, that had something unique to it. So it's my belief that most people, especially most professionals, do have a story, something that's interesting about their life, or their take on life, or their experiences. So it's the question of understanding what to share about that. Yeah, you have to get over yourself in terms of, I still don't like how my voice sounds. It's those kinds of things. You just think, like, what are the things that would typically hold you back from sharing your point of view with the world and creating content? It's that you don't think you're as good as name person. You don't think you're as good as someone else that you hear or see or read. You don't think the world needs another, needs another podcast or another newsletter or another post on something. But if you focus on your point of view and say, you know what, there are these like one or two things that I've shared with people that did seem to kind of get a reaction or get some traction with them. What happens if I actually just share that a little bit more often? I think that's just kind of the guiding principle to think about that. And we need each other more than ever right now. Like we really do need a community of leaders in the space. We need to hear from each other. It's not enough to go once a year or twice a year to conferences. I think that's a big part of it, to be in person with people. But we learned a few things from the pandemic, and one of them was we need to stay connected. So
Yes,
I
yes.
think I think like just keeping that simple and not trying to be everything to everyone is a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think now in a world where we don't have as many C-suite executives at a lot of new organizations, we have fractional leadership, consultancy, and a lot of that's remote. How do you balance that need for like the human connection when a lot of the times we're working with clients remotely, we're never really full time with the company as much as we are in a fractional perspective. How do you keep that balance?
That's a really good point. I think it's recognizing the shift that's happened over the last few years, which is people want to consume content from individuals, from leaders, from humans, not from brands for the most part, especially from other marketers. We tend to, you know, put out a lot of content for the most part compared to other leaders in other industries. So you still feel like, okay, does somebody want to hear this? I think there's just a recognition that comes with that um, of being able to know who you're creating content for and who you're not creating it for, if that makes sense. Like think about it. Think about content that you read that is so generic. And yes, this was even before ChatGPT, before AI related generated content has taken over everything. And what kinds of percentages do we hear of the amount of content that you see on a daily basis that is generated by AI and how quickly that's growing? It's even not even taking that into account, just the fact that there's a lot of content out there. The more that you create content that tries to please everyone because you think you're trying to game the system or you think you're going to gain more followers by getting, sharing an opinion that you think is shared by more people, it actually tends to be the exact opposite. It tends to be, if you know who you're right for and who you're wrong for, then you're going to more quickly gain traction with those who you are right for, if that makes sense. Your point of view, your solution, whatever you're trying to put out content about, uh, it's not for everybody. And that could be hard because I think we spent 10, 15 years, almost 20 years, just trying to build up audiences, just to gain followers with the hope of that a percentage of those followers or a percentage of that audience, you can even talk about like an email audience, just a percentage of those people or followers would consume your message. And so that is what has shifted the most in my mind of recognizing that's not the game anymore, and being able to factor that into whatever content you're trying to create.
Absolutely. And especially in the healthcare space, that's a very risk averse space. It's a space that's a little bit different than a lot of other marketing perspectives. But I feel like there's still the story at the heart of everything that you try to do when we're marketing for healthcare. So, have you noticed any shift pre-pandemic, post-pandemic with how healthcare institutions, hospitals, services are marketing?
Oh, big time, big time. I think it came more, what was that, 21, probably like late 2022 with so for those who aren't familiar with the healthcare side, like the OCR came out with guidance about tracking pixels, among other privacy issues and challenges on hospital websites, and basically said if you don't have a BAA with, there's a lot to it, but those who don't have a BAA that you don't have BAA with, basically like it's not kosher anymore to have those tracking pixels on your site
Oh wow.
because it's a hospital website, because
Right.
there could be HIPAA involved. There could be personal identifying personal health information in there somewhere.
Yes.
And it was just such as broad guidance without a lot of detail. And it's just sent healthcare marketers into a tailspin for the last 3 years. Gratefully, the last 12 to 18 months or so, there have been solutions put out on the market. There are a lot more institutions talking there, but that was just an exasperation of a healthcare marketing base that was already tired of answering questions about, can you do this because of HIPAA? Can you do this because you're talking about
Right.
healthcare? And if anyone mentions anything about anything they're experiencing, their own condition, there's the list of the things you're not allowed to share. So I've found even in those days that even pre-pandemic, even before all of that guidance in the healthcare world really started driving a different conversation, and literally like just like scorched earth. We have to remove all pixels because we don't know what we're doing.
Wow.
We don't know what the guidance is. It's just set off. And ask any healthcare marketer like what they've had to, especially anyone with a provider organization or hospital or health system. It has been a 3-year period unlike any other. So again, there are solutions, or there are ways back from it, but that level of discomfort and we're gonna get sued, FDA is gonna come for us, whoever it is, we're in trouble. That led discussions, and before that, it was still just based on, yeah, personal identifying information. Again, the number of times questions would come up of something like as simple as a patient story, a patient who was treated by a provider, had a great experience, wants to share that experience. They got their life back. Their life was saved or whatever. They have a better quality of life. They want to share their experience. You already had to jump through some relatively simple hurdle, you had to jump through some simple hoops then of just making sure you had their permission, because you can't share that
Sure.
anything about
Sure.
their health without their permission, that kind of thing. Both of those things just kind of, yeah, they're evolutions and they'll never stop. Like, there will always be questions about privacy. There will always be questions about what you actually share and what's okay and what's not. And the thing that's helped me is just like you can push the envelope in a risk averse space like healthcare as long as you understand the rules thoroughly. So you do have to understand every guardrail. You have to understand every implication of everything that's posted and how you're set up. And so it's worth putting all the time into that. You have to do that. But then you don't just want to have the goal of getting back to the status quo of really bland generic content. Like, you really do need to
Right.
push. You really,
Yes.
you're
Yes.
talking like when I was at a hospital, we ended up becoming the first. We pushed for this. We pushed to be. We ended up becoming the first institution anywhere to live stream a children's surgery, a child surgery,
Oh,
and
wow.
this was in 2016.
Yeah.
It was actually on Periscope before, like when it was
I
actually a
remember
standalone
Periscope.
app.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when it was a standalone app still, and that was
Yeah.
like the easiest way to still have engagement and things. And there was a certain procedure. There was a surgeon who was interested in doing that, and it felt like we were really either going to be pushing something or we're going to learn lot of hard lessons. Well, we
Yes.
ended up being really successful with it. That wasn't easy, and I wouldn't say that's the natural way to push things everywhere. In this case, it was like a type of surgery that we had a couple of hundred parents on live during the broadcast, of almost 300 people watching live, which again, if you don't get caught in the numbers there, you had 300 people actually like commenting and asking questions,
Yes.
and a
That's a lot.
surgical coordinator answering questions like, yes, this part you're seeing right here, like here's what's going on there. And it was great. I don't know, like we learned a lot there. So I would say, where do you push the boundaries? Where do you push the envelope in healthcare with creative? It's a sea of sameness out there. It is a sea of like not authentic content for a lot of
Mhm.
provider organizations. Doctors aren't usually happy and smiling, but like
No.
all the stock imagery and B-roll that we see still is a lot of like doctors like high-fiving each other and stuff, and you're like, that is
Yeah.
that is not authentic. So, we have a good time laughing about that. So, like, where to push? Yeah, creative messaging, and I'd say brand experience. There are so many ways to differentiate and catch up with other industries with how somebody's experiencing your brand. So, like,
Oh,
where don't
absolutely.
you push? Tracking pixels, cookies, and regulations.
Right. Right. All the above. My
Yeah.
very first job in the creative space was at a hospital, and it was one of the most meaningful roles to me because you can see the direct effect of what your organization is doing, how it's healing people, saving lives, bringing families together. And this was by far pre-pandemic. And so I can only imagine how much that's, changed as far as the regulations and the rules. But to me, the thing that always won was the story, right? The story, people typically, I feel like, trust, if you're a big name hospital, especially, they trust that the doctor should know what they're doing, right? But it's more of the how does that affect the patient's life that really made the connection. So, have you seen the use of videos specifically telling those stories as a beneficial part of like the hospital's funnel?
Yes, the word funnel is always tricky, right, with the hospital because people aren't actively shopping for their healthcare services, and so rarely is there a direct attribution that's just clear as day, as clear as people actually want it to be. But it does exist. Like there is attribution, and it is complicated. But yes, how else are you going to build up and be in someone's mind in any capacity?
Right.
Realistically, if they haven't seen that, patient stories just still to this day still resonate with people. Short form videos, short forms of that, reels taken from a longer patient story, absolutely do resonate with people. So like you have to remember that kind of truth at the base of anything. And yes, the attribution is tricky because yeah, hey, click here to schedule, your surgery. Like that, it doesn't work like that. Like it just doesn't. So understanding which line of brand and demand video content lies on, you have to understand the patients that you need there. And there are some easy solves here. One of them is as simple as like asking people when they do schedule surgery, like a simple, even an open form. How did you hear about us? It sounds so outdated. And yet when they say, I watched that video, which in the case of that live stream surgery that we talked about before,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that specific content over even a 3 month and 6 month period, which usually there's a longer time for someone to decide they want it and actually schedule. It's not an emergency surgery, but it's one that like as a child gets older and they're in their like late to mid teens, like they want to have this certain thing figured out for them.
Right.
So like there's a time period that mom and dad or whoever, caretakers, friends are like researching for them. So that was acknowledged, but we were still able to see like a 3 month and a 6 month period because the surgical coordinator would ask every single person who's scheduled during that time, hey, did you happen to see this live broadcast or the rebroadcast that we have on the website, and tracked how many yeses they had. So I mean, like
Wow.
again, it's not like a new tool or anything. It's so old of a way of doing it, and yet tracking in that case contribution margin was significant because of that. So yeah, it's there. It's just the reality, like don't try to make it something it's not. Just understand what people will and won't do in healthcare based on what they've seen, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to healthcare, obviously authenticity and trust is everything. So besides, the great example of the live surgery and other stories, what are some other ways to build that brand authenticity and really build trust with the clients?
So on a brand basis in healthcare, it is tricky. So come back to that truth we just talked about, right? That people
Mhm.
aren't actively shopping for it. What
Right.
what state of mind are people typically in when they are engaging in healthcare, when they're contacting a doctor, a hospital, an ER, urgent care? They're usually in a vulnerable state of mind. They're usually panicked, uh, varying degrees of panic.
Yeah.
Either myself or someone I care about is not feeling well. I don't like seeing them
Right.
like hurting. So like that, like you just can't ever take that for granted. You just can't ever really go all the way away from that in healthcare and ignore that. That's the state of mind people are in. So there's also all these big, existential problems going on in healthcare. There aren't enough providers. They're trying to figure out how to use AI in their actual clinical care, the ways they're treating people, the science behind it. Now, what can we do? There's the administrative burden that's always been a problem for the staff, for the clinical team. There's all these big existential problems. How does the hospital, make any money? all those things. So you want to be authentic and show that. Like you
Yeah.
still have a story to tell. Uh, so you always have to come back to that. Well, like, what is the story you want to tell? And what do you mean by authentic, right? Like what are the points of that? That doesn't mean let's show you how hard it is to be a doctor. I don't think, like, if you're trying to connect with patients want to feel like they have the best doctor working on them or working for them
Yes.
and treating them. So they want to feel confident in the doctor, and then they also still want to feel like this doctor cares about them. So which parts of a story are you being authentic about? Like that has to be considered. You also have to factor in whether your brand has a leg to stand on any particular category. I feel like around 2020 and the discussions that our country was having, that were
Hmm.
good discussions that we needed to have with our society. You'd have groups that would try to take a stand or have a position on something, and sometimes they would get criticized for not, well, you don't have a leg to stand on. Like, you don't even have a right to talk about that. And you can't change how people feel about that, I don't think, like, in the moment. So you have to be careful about, the how far will you go? And that means, right, like political or societal issues, like what do you want to be authentic about? So you just have to factor all that in. The other side of it is, on a personal standpoint, from a personal standpoint, how do you build authenticity in yourself? Sometimes that can be easier because if you're just starting to post reels, talking to the camera and you're just sharing your thoughts, like that will feel more authentic for the most part than a brand coming out with just a really genericized, even AI generated statement on some public matter. You always have to just, think about those basics. What are you doing it for? What do you want to be authentic about and why? And then, yes, do you have a leg to stand on? Is it better coming from a brand or from a leader, from a person within your organization? And just kind of go from there. And yes, it's so easy just to try to feel like you're gonna put something out there, and then it's so easy for it to be attacked. So yeah, you have to do it. You have to do it wisely. You do have to see, like, what's likely for somebody to say that, like, you're not the ones to be talking about this. So you know.
Yeah. Well, as a consumer and someone who's been on the media development side of a hospital, I feel like they all will put out polished content. Every hospital is the best in certain areas, in certain ways. They're obviously not going to polish a commercial about all their shortcomings. And so it's hard as a consumer if you have that emergency situation to think, where am I going to take my family member, or where am I going to go when I start to feel this? So a lot of it has to do with, location, convenience, but also I feel like in every other area of marketing as well, there's the UGC, the word of mouth, all the things in addition to the polished content that makes a difference. Is there anything that you've seen become even more successful than, the fundraising content, the polished commercials for the institution?
The thing that comes to mind, there's an orthopedic department that we created a lot of content for, and what they found success with was reels where you could get an orthopedic surgeon just saying, like, what are, like, the two or three things you tell patients the most, like, that you don't expect to tell them, like the
Yeah.
questions that you're answering the most, and you just get them going. You're like, okay, like, hold on, say that again. Cameras on, we're rolling now. And those worked extremely well because they were humanizing the doctor, but it put them in a state of, like, before you go through this formal, complicated process of scheduling an appointment and checking with your insurance and all that, you're actually seeing something come straight from the doctor, from the surgeon in this case, of how they feel about something. We would ask them, like, what got you into medicine? What got you into orthopedics? And, film those responses. And so it was recognition of, like, multiple touch points. Any particular surgeon might have recorded 4 to 6 different reels. And
Mhm.
those were a lot more touch points that were more likely to show, like, they came off very authentic,
Yeah.
because they were, like, questions that they were easy to answer in their case. And yes, they were polished, but I think it was the way that they came off, just like super light background music. It wasn't trying to be something. It wasn't trying to be like the latest, I don't know, top 10 on Spotify track. It was like
Right.
something something that matched what they were saying. They were still a clinician in a lab coat, so it was still approachable. But like we would look a lot at like, okay, that music, let's tweak that a little bit. So yeah, we would get down to the details of that, but that versus just coming up with like one really all capturing video for the whole department that is really formal, made a lot more, uh, uh, led to a lot more engagement for one, but led to a much better brand position that they wanted to be in. And it's because they recognized in their case, like that worked for them. That won't work for everybody, but it's an approach in healthcare that is to be considered, rather than what they'll tend to want to do in a lot of cases of, yeah, let's show everything. Let's show all the cool scientific things we're doing. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't, that matters in certain spots, but probably not what we're doing this for.
I feel like that's like the marketer's struggle, right? Is humanizing, whether it's a complex issue or humanizing something as complex as a clinician who, like you said earlier, is not always, the smiley picture that you see in a stock video, but showing that this clinician is approachable, friendly, is the pro in the area. That's going to help drive me to want to get care there.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it is. It's in their case that worked because of the personalities in their department. Not everyone worked as
Not
well on
everybody has the
camera.
personality. Yeah.
And that's okay too. We were still able to pull enough out, for a 30-second reel. you
Yep.
know, just
Exactly.
answer the one question, even if they felt uncomfortable. And yeah.
Yeah, well, you're always talking about moving healthcare marketing forward, and I love that concept. So, what are some outdated video practices that you think all marketers should leave behind?
Oh, what a good question. um, let's see. Easily probably that thought of trying. You can try too hard. Yeah, people still know it's a hospital or it's a health system or it's a doctor's office. You can overreach. You
Yep.
can come off as not authentic because you're trying too hard.
Yep.
Just like if you're trying to be cool with your teenage kids or whatever, you're just trying too hard, like trying
Yeah.
to, like, I shouldn't sound like I'm a teenager when I'm a
Right.
parent, right, around my teenage
Right.
kids. So you can come off that way. Outdated wise, I mean, if you're just not living and breathing, if the bread and butter video content you're not producing, if the bread and butter content that you're producing isn't reels, so yeah, vertical, 60 seconds or less. Uh, it's hard to feel like anything else is going to get any significant engagement,
Yeah.
other than occasionally, right? Like this, I mean, like the bread and butter, like the heart and soul of video campaigns that you're running.
Yeah.
In a provider's case, they'll have a listing, like a page on any website for their hospital or health system. It should have a video intro to them. That's the destination where you're trying to drive patients to look at if they just want to get to know you better before they schedule with you. Some people, don't like the term that you're shopping for doctors, but like that's the product. Like that's the thing that healthcare is selling. So that's the reality of it. Uh, Video wise, yeah, like I don't know, just getting to it. You can also be so super clinical. Um, that same orthopedic department, um, some had a lot harder time than others just talking like you're talking to a teenager instead of talking to another clinician, you know,
Mm.
who's had the equivalent of whatever 25th grade reading level and whatever.
Yes.
That's probably the biggest thing that I still see. Like you're using even words that you think are so normal, even like patient portal, MyChart, EHR, even just basic stuff in the chart. Who on the street knows what the chart is? Like it just it it just takes like they're probably good at explaining. A doctor's probably good at explaining, or anyone on the clinical team, the actual treatment in those terms, but it's some of those other things about their experience. Like, okay, and they usually don't want to address billing questions. So, like, don't have them answer questions about parts of the patient experience that they really aren't a part of. But yeah, like, there's so much to be said for getting the language, the content, the video, the chart, 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 the video, level right, and being able to not talk down to somebody, but talk in a way that they understand and grasp it. There's so much jargon in healthcare, and
Yes.
it just doesn't have a place in anywhere outside maybe the exam room or the clinical team coordinating. But my goodness, like there's ways to do that effectively too. There's also ways to do that are just really, they feel like you're just talking down to people again. So like just that's the art and science right now of I think that leads to better video for sure.
Marketers down to the nitty-gritty, marketers are a lot of times pressed to prove ROI. So from what you've seen, how can you really measure that with, video content, whether that's ad or like you said, the surgeries, the reels? How can you prove ROI beyond just vanity metrics with impressions in the healthcare space?
So I wish I had, this perfect magic way to do it for everything. I would say still engagement and video views are part of your broader ROI plan. Even just that nugget of like you can track some things starting at MyChart is relatively new.
Mhm.
So I would say a lot of providers aren't there yet and aren't even aware of that. So that's a big piece of it. That gets you at least some data, like even if it's I don't know, like 0.01%, you can at least have your metric of on average. Yeah, like here are all our stats there. So at the same time, like that orthopedics department that I was working with, like that was organic social uh, reels that we knew people weren't going to just watch one, but we were paying attention to the number of touches that it took, um, and trying to match that up. Even in their case, if it was a manual process of new patients who had seen multiple videos, so a lot of that was manual, but yes, like you still have to base it on the fact that this is still gonna be the easiest way for somebody to consume information about this. If you do it right, they will have, uh, they will want to know more, and so it is still a serious MarTech and ROI challenge, um, but those are the that's the reality of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you've worked with the large organizations and some scrappier, startup type organizations. What do you feel like you've learned in your experience with the larger companies that can really apply and benefit some of these smaller companies that you've helped?
I've always thought that the scrappier, smaller companies have a leg up if they realize it because the larger ones tend to take longer.
Yep.
So if you know what you're doing, if you can spin up content or a campaign quickly, you have fewer hoops to jump through, and you can make up ground on whatever you think that larger competitor's brand is
Hmm.
a lot quicker. I mean, a great example, when I was at Praia Health, they were a consumer engagement platform that's kind of hard to explain. It was kind of a new category. There weren't other companies doing things in the exact same way that they were, but they were a way for you as a consumer to interact with your health system. Like, so it
Mm.
kind of powered a health system's app. It was like all these things where like we kept throwing mud at the wall and like having an informed way to explain what the product was, what the platform was, and kept tweaking it based on that. And there was kind of a turning point where, in their case, they had one use case that made a lot of sense. It was, hey, when you're ready for lab work through LabCorp, which is a partner of theirs,
Yeah.
when you're ready to schedule that, how how easy is that normally? It usually involves multiple logins, and you have to create another login for a place that you don't
Yes.
know if you'll ever use again.
Yep.
It's cumbersome. You don't know where to go. You might have lost the email that you got sent,
It's the
even if
worst.
they're texting it to you. You're like, I don't remember what I was supposed to do, and then you're frustrated when the doctor's like, why didn't you schedule your labs?
Right.
And then the lab and the doctor both are at a disadvantage if you don't schedule your labs. So something as simple as that, in their case, of being able to just have that pop up as a push notification from the health system app, like it's integrated in. You don't have to create
Nice.
another login,
Yep. Yep.
and it's based on information that you already had. So anyway, like in their case, Praia had this use case. LabCorp came on as a partner. They developed this for health systems, and that was still a lot to explain until they created an explainer video, like a 90-second. explainer video that literally walked that through the story of a patient.
Yep.
Yes, this person had that exact same thing happen. And yeah, it seemed like a simple thing, but they're like, this is what it means to, in their case, orchestrate an experience for a consumer. So marketing wise, we're able to see a significant jump in pipeline activity because of that. And yes, more engagement, things like that. But we're able to directly attribute that to greater pipeline activity because of that video. And in that case, it was really easy because people were reaching out that had been cold in the pipeline, inactive. They're like, hey, I saw the video. Now I want to talk to you guys again.
Now it
So
makes sense. Yeah, because of the
now it makes
explainer.
sense. Right. And in their case, like they were trying to build a new category. So that just takes time to educate a market anyway. And yeah, being a tech, like they were in the B2B space. So that's different than trying to reach consumers. But in their case, the video was an easy way to see success there and driving pipeline, which in their case was what they needed.
Yeah, it's a great example. I feel like the explainers do really well, especially with the startups in the B2B space, but it also helps almost every consumer really drive that sale. And obviously it's not really the top of funnel type of metric, but more of like, hey, you're interested, or like you said, they've been kind of in the system already, and that really pushed them over the edge of like, yes, we're gonna download this and it's gonna work.
And now, the clarity check.
My first clarity check question for you is, what is an example of the cringiest video that you've seen in healthcare?
That's such a good question. Cringy in healthcare tends to be one of two ways. It was either like too gross, or like literally, gross.
Too much information. Yeah.
Too much information, too much visual, too much blood.
Yep.
Or it's just so generic that we in marketing just can't get over how unauthentic it is. So like the smiling doctors and things, right? Like the number of times the new campaigns roll out for health systems, and it's like one word different than what it was before.
Yep.
The sea of sameness is still just like so cringy, and yeah, we can always do better.
I love that. All right, short form or long form, which has the best impact in healthcare as far as video?
Short form still rules the day right now. Doing that well, you can tell a story, you can tell it in multiple parts. You have so many different entry points to it. That's still what algorithms care about. So yeah, short form all the way right now.
Cool. All right, so if you had to make a 2-minute explainer or a TED Talk type of deal, what would your message be to marketers?
Maybe just the thought of, so I wouldn't say I've had a linear or exponential career path in marketing. I think few people in healthcare have. But if I had to sum that up, I guess it would be to find the aspects of marketing that you love and do everything you can to stay close to those. Most people who've come into marketing, I find, who stay in marketing, did it because something rocked their world, some aspect of it. Whether it's being able to be on the creative side and tell stories in the right way, and you got really good tactically, and you love creating content, doing the creative, or the ability to influence something in the industry, or build a business, or influence growth in a business. You're able to see it. There's usually some aspect of healthcare, or there's usually some aspect of marketing. Sometimes more than one. Well, usually something got you into it. You're like, there's some magic going on here in marketing. And there will be times that every single person, I'm convinced now, will be challenged, and will need to remember that, and will need to stay close to that. So on those days where the burnout's feeling strong, or you're just, unsure, you feel a little wrapped around the axle, it's so easy to be focused on everything that's up and changing, like all the change right now.
Yeah.
Remember why you got into the space, keep that as your North Star, and come back to that as often as you need. That will drive your leadership. That will drive your interactions with others. That will drive your ability in your own professional development.
How would you define clarity?
Clarity is explaining things where other people understand them. You can think you understand it, and communication is a two-way street. If people don't receive the thing you're sharing with them, then it likely didn't do the job that it was built for. So yeah, like something needs to be explained where other people understand it.
Right. And the last one, do you have an example of a healthcare brand or some sort of content that you've seen that you feel like deserves a ton of credit for the marketing creativity, whether you've worked for them or whether it's something else that you've seen, something that really stood out to you in the healthcare marketing space?
Maybe this is a slight change on the question, so I can change this if you need. But like what I'd like to see is actually more content that helps us understand how to be more preventive with our health and how to be well instead of just treating us once we're sick. I think there are a couple of organizations that do that, but they're politically charged right now.
Yes,
if that makes sense. And I do think there's a lot of information that needs to be told with clarity, and video probably is the best way to do it, that will help people regain trust in the system. So while I can't point to anyone in particular, but anyone who's helping create content to build trust and bridge that gap between how do we actually be well versus treating us when we're sick, anyone in those spaces, I would like double down on and say like, I would cheer for them. I'll share that type of content because those are some of the greater needs that we have for content to make a difference in healthcare right now. There's so much misinformation and there's so much misunderstanding and a lack of trust. Meanwhile, there are millions of providers who are trained to help people, and there aren't even enough of them right now, but they want to help, and that's what they do most of the day long is helping other people. So connecting people with care in that right way, like that takes content to rebuild trust and to help people just navigate otherwise a very hard landscape to understand, and one of the things that nobody wants to deal with in their life. So yeah, slight variation, apologies for that, but I would just say like that I would love to see more of that. There are organizations creating content in that space, but I think we need exponentially more of it to get to a better place.
I 1000% agree with you. I think there's so much noise in that space because there's a lot of UGC, there's a lot of influencer marketing that may or may not be a medical professional. And so as you scroll reels, coffee's killing you, coffee kills cancer, anything else, drink too much water, you're drinking too little water. There's so much noise, and to have content that's preventative from an actual provider would be a game changer.
It really would, and it's even simpler than people might think.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, Jared. It's been super insightful to hear from you and the perspective of healthcare marketing and how that applies to other marketers. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Brandon. Yeah, a lot of fun to dig into this stuff, and thanks for having me on.
What a great conversation with Jared. I think it's so important that we're constantly learning, bettering ourselves in our craft. And one way to do that is to learn from someone that's outside of our own category. And what better than healthcare marketing? Healthcare has so many regulations and restrictions in how content and tracking is used. But at the same time, we're all the ICP of some sort of medical need, whether that's something as basic as your kids getting braces or someone in your family needing major heart surgery. It's something that speaks to all of us. And as I mentioned in the podcast, one of my first jobs was actually in healthcare content creation. And I was struck by how great it is to see the stories of the lives that were changed and affected based on the providers. So I think there's a lot of learning that can be had from healthcare, and I hope this helped you with your industry and your craft. Thanks for watching The Clarity Code. We'll catch you next time.
Catch The Clarity Code on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.